This is the first episode in our season covering missing persons and unsolved homicides across the southeastern United States. This episode has brief discussions of violence, and listener discretion is advised. The victim, Laresha Dean Walker, went by her family nickname Deana, but you'll hear family and law enforcement refer to her by both names throughout the episode. This is The Fall Line. No matter how many times we return to Music City, there are more cold cases waiting, and files dating back decades. Over the past 2 years, we've brought you more than 24 cold cases from the Metro Nashville Police Department. Homicides, John and Jane Doe victims, whom the department is seeking to identify, and missing people whose families have been waiting years or even decades for answers. Detective Matthew Filter has collaborated with us to feature each person in hopes that tips and leads might come in. And that has worked. Your social media shares and the increased media presence of each case has made a real difference. And that's why he contacted us again to feature 2 missing women from Nashville, Laresha Deana Walker and Wanda Faye Walker, mother and daughter, both missing. Their files remain separate because they disappeared nearly 20 years apart, with no known connection between their cases. We know of other families facing multiple unsolved cases, especially in the tribal nations that we've featured on the podcast. But a mother and daughter, both disappearing decades apart, it's still a rare, horrific experience. What the family of Wanda Faye Walker and Laresha Walker have been through stretches the boundaries of belief. Except that we know that it's true, and they lived through it. A daughter disappeared, and her mother faced the lack of answers, the cold case. And then she was gone too, and her remaining family was thrust into the nightmare again. Laresha Walker disappeared in 1999. Her mother, Wanda Faye Walker, was reported missing in 2016. And their family members, Wanda's daughters, their father, their children, Laresha's son, and their aunts, uncles, and cousins, who make up a close network in Tennessee, they haven't stopped the cycle of calls to police, missing persons posters, vigils, pushes for media coverage, all of that for decades. That feeling is familiar to many of the loved ones we've interviewed over the years. But the Walkers are the first that we've featured, who've been forced to do it twice, without resolution. Laresha Deana Walker was 23 years old in the fall of 1999, and the mother of a 2-year-old son, Rayvon. Deana, she usually went by her family nickname, was working with a temp agency and was living on the east side of Nashville, in one side of a duplex townhome that she'd recently rented for herself and her son. We've told you about many versions of Nashville on this show. It has changed throughout the decades, like any big city, building itself up and tearing itself down into different landscapes and formations, making new promises and discovering new problems, too. In 1999, Nashville was still recovering from the historic tornadoes that had hit the city a year before. The flooding and destruction had reshaped much of the city, and East Nashville, where Deana lived, was the area hardest hit. In our episodes on the disappearance and death of Lorian Nicholson and his misclassification as a John Doe for 15 years, we covered the lasting effects of that storm. That wasn't all the city was struggling with. As we've reported in the past, Nashville faced a serious increase in violent crimes in the mid to late 90s, with homicide rates soaring. Reporter John Yates, who covered crime for the Tennessean throughout the 1990s, interviewed detectives who said that by 1997, they were sometimes, quote, juggling 5 murder cases at once. As for missing persons, the Tennessean reported that 1,273 adults were reported missing in Nashville in 1999. But very few of those people remained so. 2 by the next year. Deana and a man named Stephen Paul. According to NamUs, there are 10 people who disappeared in the 1990s who are still missing today, and Deana Walker is one of them. Detective Matthew Filter, who you'll hear from in our episodes on Deana and Wanda Faye, can't speak to the original investigations into Deana's disappearance. He inherited her case years later, when he began to work on her mother Wanda Faye's case, but he told us everything that he's pieced together about where Deana's case stands today. There's a lot that we don't know because we can't track many of Deana's movements after her last contact with family, Deana had planned to run an errand out of town in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, in a time when cell phones just were not commonplace. She left her son with her oldest sister, Laresha, on Friday, November 19th, and she planned to return Saturday evening. So, her family did not expect to hear from her right away, and when she was late, they did not immediately worry. There was no reason to think that she'd fail to come home. Deana was a devoted mother who would never abandon her son. She also took heart medication that she could not be without, and none of her belongings were missing from her home. There were so many signs that she planned to return, and yet she didn't. The Walker family is certain that someone prevented that.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Styles McKenzie helping you make those rooms sing. Today's style tip. When it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild, like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Arr, fierce. This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
Deana Walker is the second of three sisters, all born to Wanda Faye and Sydney Walker. They grew up in Nashville, surrounded by a large extended family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, all close by. Laresha is the oldest sister by 2 years, and she was particularly close to Deana. Samika, who's 6 years younger, says that she viewed Deana as the leader among the three. Laresha remembers that when they were young, the sisters spent their time outside. Roller skating was their favorite, but they could find fun in just about anything. When it came to Deana, Laresha described them as sometimes feeling more like twins than an older and younger sibling. That could have come down to how their mother, Wanda Faye, treated them. She loved to craft and sew, and she turned those talents to her girls' wardrobe.
Growing up, we, bicker like sisters did. Mom used to always dress us alike, and I think that was the same thing I ended up doing with my girls when I was raising my children. We didn't have to argue too much about clothes because we would always have the same thing. But for the most part, we just bicker like sisters. But as we got older, we got really close, and we was two peas in a pod, pretty much.
Though their parents eventually separated, Laresha says that the family unit remained close. Their father was always there for his three girls, and their grandmother and mother made sure that they attended large family gatherings. Holidays were a big deal too, and that's something you'll hear more about when we talk about Wanda Faye next episode.
We always sat down as a family, and we did go to family gatherings often. My grandmother, my mom's mother, was a part of our lives for a long time, and was one that kept everything going.
Samika told us that though Deana was close to her sisters, she was also independent and private. Deana liked to have fun, but there was a serious side to her too. And when she had her son Rayvon, Samika said that it brought new focus to her sister's life. She was barely into her 20s when he was born, and when Rayvon came along, Deana's life shifted gears. She was centered on making sure that he had everything that he needed and on supporting him.
Deana was definitely a no-nonsense person. Like, she didn't take a lot of mess from anybody. She was definitely set in her ways, and she loved Rayvon. She adored him so much. She just fell in love with him. Everything stopped once she had him. Like, she just brightened her life. I think he gave her life more purpose. Before he came, I think she was just kind of living a life of a single person just trying to make it and no responsibility and just having fun and staying out and just living a single life. And then when he came along, it just changed her. Like, she didn't have tons of friends. She could be a loner and be just fine. She stayed to herself more after she had him. And once she got her apartment, they just kind of stayed there. I mean, she worked and it was just her and him, and he was just everything to her.
Samika was still living at home with her mother and in high school when Rayvon was born. But Lakeisha was out on her own, and she was a mother herself. They all pitched in to help Deana settle into motherhood. Their father, Sidney, was a constant presence, too. He gave them advice and took care to be sure that they were safe. Samika told us that he'd often take her to work or help them find trustworthy people to work on their vehicles. That was exactly what happened in November of 1999. Deana needed to have her car, a maroon 1995 Oldsmobile Achieva, repaired. There's some inconsistent reporting around that. Some sources say that she was having the vehicle appraised. But according to an interview with her father, he said he'd arranged for her to have maintenance done on her car in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. That's a city about 35 miles southeast of Nashville. Her appointment was on Saturday, November 20th, and Deana arranged to drop off Rayvon with Lakeisha on Friday evening. Sidney filled up Deana's car for her that evening so that she would not have to get gas on her way out of town. They met up at their father's house, along with Samika, to spend time together. Samika told us they had a lot to catch up on, because Deana had a stressful week. She'd been to court that day, and she wanted to tell the family about it. When Samika mentions Lakeisha in the following clips, she's referring to her as Tika.
So that Friday, we were all at my dad's house, Tika, me, and Deana, my dad, and all of the grandchildren at that time. We were there at his house, and because Deana had went to court earlier that day. So she had an altercation with a family member, and so they were in court earlier that day. So we had all gotten together, and she was telling us about what happened at court. And apparently whatever happened was going to be postponed until January.
The altercation that Samika mentioned involved an extended family member and a physical fight. Based on what we were able to discover, an attack on Deana. That family member was female, which does have some bearing on later eyewitness information in her case. At the time, it was not something that she was overly concerned about. Stressed, yes, but not worried about in terms of safety for herself or Rayvon. Samika says that she got a feeling that night. It's not something she can really explain now, but she got this urge to spend more time with her sisters. Like, she wanted to keep them close.
That's when I was like, you know what, we should have a sleepover. Never said that before, ever. And everybody was like, no. Deana was like, I got something to do tomorrow. I don't know what made that idea pop in my head. I don't know. I just, I don't know. I have no idea. And then Tika ended up taking Rayvon, and Deana had to be at the dealership the next day. And so that's the last time we were all together. Literally, we all were together except for my mom. And that was the last time we saw her.
Lakeisha told us that when Deana left Rayvon with her Friday night, everything seemed as it should be. Deana gave Lakeisha everything she needed to take care of him. And outside of her stressful week, nothing seemed to be bothering her sister. And she had no reason to believe that she wouldn't see Deana Saturday evening. But when Saturday night came and went, and Deana didn't arrive, Lakeisha had run out of supplies for Rayvon.
Well, I still didn't think none of it that I didn't hear from her all that day. We didn't actually have to go over to the house until Sunday because, you know, she had enough diapers and everything when she left him for that Saturday. So again, we didn't think anything of it that we didn't hear from her, knowing that I had the baby. Not that that was something that she did often, but, you know, we didn't think none of it. So Sunday, is when we went over to the house, because I was like, I needed to go over there to get diapers. But again, still didn't think none of it until we went over there and opened the door and the music was playing like sky high. Like you could literally hear the music from outside.
To picture the scene that Deana's family discovered, you have to imagine the duplex where Deana lived. It's still there today, a house split into 2 apartments with a shared wall, with neighbors who would have certainly heard the loud music playing. There are other houses close by too, certainly in range to hear that music. The driveways, they sit side by side. The volume of the music was clear to Lakeisha from the yard, and she couldn't believe that the neighbors hadn't complained about it. Deana was not in the habit of cranking up her stereo, especially with a toddler in the house who needed his sleep. She was a quiet tenant, and that was the first sign that something was off. When they went inside, they noticed that Deana's apartment was neat. That was no surprise because she kept everything very clean. But it seemed as if someone, maybe 2 someones, had recently sat on the bed and they'd left the bedspread mussed. That, combined with the music, was strange. All the lights were left on too, something that Deana just wouldn't do. She was careful about turning things off, and they also noted that nothing was missing from her home, and that her car was not in the driveway.
When I got to the house, it did look like 2 people could have been sitting on the bed. Like I said, it was just unclear, and the neighbors didn't really have much to say. I don't know if they really didn't talk to her or, because my thing is this. I said, if the music was blasting like that all night, did you hear anything? Did you see anything? I would have been calling the police or trying to knock on the door if somebody's music playing like that all day long. Yeah, after that, it was like, something is not right with this picture. Then, of course, that's when we made the call, which would have been a couple of days after the fact. So, of course, we feel a way about that because we didn't jump on it as fast as we should have, or that we thought we should have. Which, of course, you can't. You got to get on it the first couple of days to really know what happened.
According to Detective Filter's review of Deana's file, when the family, including Wanda Faye, their mother, entered Deana's apartment on Sunday, November 21st, it was locked. It was Wanda who placed the call to police, and later officially filed the missing persons report on her daughter. Samika told us that Wanda Faye had issues reporting Deana missing. That's something that we have heard again and again from families.
I think my mom tried to call the police that Sunday. We had to wait like 48 hours or something before she would be able to report it. So I can remember coming home from work and just being there with her and us waiting on, I think we had to wait until Monday to make the actual report.
After an officer took the report and left, Samika said that the family was unsure how to proceed. So they began to call relatives and friends and searching for any sign of their sister. Sidney, their father, printed up missing persons flyers, and he began to distribute them across the city. They also continued to look around Deana's home, and they noted a few more details that helped them establish a timeline, and one that deeply concerned them.
We started looking at the house. We saw the clothes that she had on was still in the house. On Friday when we saw her, the outfit that she had on was still in the house in her laundry basket. So we knew she had changed clothes. So we called the police and we told them that I think we had a contact information at that time for a detective. And so we were like, there's spots on the wall. This looks like blood. So we could get them to come back out to the house to do more investigative work. We didn't know what it was on the wall, but it was red. So we were just trying to get them to get back out there to take it more seriously.
In a 1999 article on Deana's case, we found mention of those red stains. According to a November 27th article from the Tennessean, then homicide detective David Miller was assigned to Deana's case. Per the article, Sidney told the paper that, quote, family members noticed spots that looked to them like bloodstains near the front of the door of the townhouse, meaning the duplex. The paper then spoke with Detective Miller, who said he was, quote, awaiting results on the stains and was treating Deana's disappearance as a missing persons case. When we checked with Detective Filter, He said he had no results regarding those tests in his file on the case. So we don't know what the results were, and if the stains tested positive for blood, Deana's or anyone else's. What was clear, though, was that Deana had returned to her home after dropping off Rayvon with Lakeisha. Her clothing verified that, but so did the neighbors. They might not have complained about music playing from her apartment, but they did report that they'd seen her that evening, sometime after she'd left Rayvon with her sister. We can mark that in the timeline by the simple fact that she did not have her son with her when she came to the residence. When we spoke with Detective Filter about Deana's disappearance, we asked him to describe what those witnesses said.
Yeah, so after Laresha dropped her son off with her sister, she was seen by neighbors later on that evening with another black male driving a car that was not hers. According to the neighbor, Laresha and this unidentified man were having some kind of an argument. They went inside her house for a short period of time and then came back out. And when they came back out, they were still arguing, but they got in the car and left together. And that, we believe, is the last person to have seen Laresha alive.
We don't know who that man is. Witness descriptions of him and of the car he was driving were frustratingly vague. Another neighbor said that Deana did have a male friend or possible boyfriend who would occasionally pick her up, but that she never got a good look at him. He'd honk the horn as Deana would exit her apartment and get in his car. It's unclear whether this was the same individual seen at Deana's apartment that night. The obvious question is whether this man was Rayvon's father, and the answer there is complex and unknown. The man previously identified as Rayvon's father had been taken to family court for child support. He told Metro Nashville police that a paternity test had proved that he was not related to Rayvon, and he was not held liable for care. We were unable to locate court records to verify this. He also stated in an interview with police that he'd last seen Deana about 3 weeks prior to her disappearance, and they had not been involved in a relationship for some time. So, who was the man seen with Deana that night? Her family simply doesn't know. They knew some of Deana's friends, but none of them stepped up to say that they'd been with her. But there were more questions. If she had left with a man, had she returned? When had the music been turned up so loudly? And what had happened to Deana's own vehicle? To her family and law enforcement's knowledge, she never arrived in Murfreesboro for her appointment. So something happened between the time she was last seen and the morning of Saturday, November 20th. Detective Filter says that they've run her tags for years, but they've never gotten any hits, and no reports on vehicles matching the description of her achiever reported in unusual circumstances in Nashville or on the way to Murfreesboro. We discussed the search for her car with him during an interview this past winter.
Over the years, we've actually come across a couple Oldsmobile Achievas, maroon color, that we actually thought were hers, but ended up not being after running the VIN number.
One thing you mentioned to me was the relative rarity of never recovering the vehicle. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's really hard to get rid of a car. In most areas, it's very difficult to hide something as large as a car for a long period of time. About the only way you ever can get away with doing that is if you or someone you know has a lot of property and you can just park it out there in the middle of the property where nobody is going to ever find it other than people that have legal access to the property. And even if you allow somebody permission to go onto the property, they're not necessarily going to think that a car in the middle of the property has any connection to a crime. Other things that we've often found is people will sink cars in lakes or rivers, but oftentimes even those cars get recovered over the years. We pull cars out of the Cumberland River here in Nashville on a regular basis, and oftentimes these cars that we recover are reported as stolen or were used in some other crime. So that it's all going back to saying it's extremely difficult to get rid of a car without having some adequate location that you can put it where nobody is ever going to either stumble across it or think it's anything out of the ordinary or unusual.
A rumor that has been passed around over the years could provide potential answers as to what could have happened to Deana's car. But like everything else in her case, it's frustratingly vague and without enough of a solid lead for investigators to follow. There were rumors that her car could have been taken and dropped off in rural Alabama, but there's nothing more specific than that. According to Detective Filter, that gossip was tied to information regarding Deana's possible participation in an upcoming criminal trial. It's important to note that this trial is separate from the court proceeding that she'd been involved in with a family member. Apparently, this trial would have been much more high-level and called Deana as a witness for the prosecution.
So one of the things that we learned through the investigation was that Laresha was supposed to be testifying or possibly going to testify in a criminal trial against an individual. And this individual was trying to stop her from testifying. So there's been some information that's come in that something could have happened to her in regards to this. But again, we don't have anything that conclusively says that is what happened to her. It's just a possibility.
That's an angle that Detective Filter is currently reinvestigating, now that he's been assigned to Deana's case. The rumor that her car could have ended up in Alabama is connected to it as well. But there was little to go on in 1999, and no clear signs that linked that individual to Deana's home on the evening that she vanished. But Detective Filter believes that someone was involved in Deana's disappearance. It's unlikely that she met with an accident or purposely disappeared. We also mentioned that she was on heart medication, and it was absolutely essential to her health. She'd been in a serious car accident in 1998 that required her to have open heart surgery to save her life, and without that prescription, Deana could not survive. She simply would not leave for any period of time without it, and the bottle was discovered in her apartment. But her family never believed that she would have gone willingly anyway, not without her son Rayvon, who they described as the center of her world. And the Nashville Metropolitan Police Department, they agree.
I believe the foul play is involved in her case. I think just the mere fact that there hasn't been any signs of life at all from Laresha since 1999 speaks volumes to it. There was also a lot of things going on in Laresha's life that could have put her in a little bit of danger of people that may have wanted to harm her. I can't, again, confirm that that's necessarily what happened, but there were a lot of things from Laresha's past that kind of stand out that make you wonder if something hadn't caught up with her and someone harmed her.
On that note, are there any suspects in Laresha's case?
I would not call any of them necessarily suspects. There's a few persons of interest that I think are worth looking into a little bit more and trying to figure out exactly where they were around the time she disappeared. But, right now, the biggest person of interest is the individual that was with her that night that the neighbor saw her, because that individual would probably hold the best information in telling us where she went or who she may have been with before she disappeared.
Samika told us that in the earliest days of the search for her sister, she had a sense that something had happened to Deana. It was a feeling that she couldn't explain, much like the urge that she'd had on Friday, November 19th, when she'd had the sudden idea to have that slumber party and to keep Deana from leaving.
So after we called the police, we finally got it reported. I think a couple of days after that, I felt her spirit tell us that she was gone and that we needed to take care of Rayvon. I've never felt that again in my life. I never heard it again in my life. It was just shortly after she went missing, she had said she was gone and that she wanted us to take care of Rayvon. And she came to me and said it. And I always will remember that because it's never happened again. I don't think I told my mom, but I told my dad and I told Tika about it because, of course, we all want to have the hope and that she's still alive. Of course, we don't ever want to give up hope. And I think that like pushing that over to the side is more comfortable than actually dealing with what I felt happen, you know? I think that she just wasn't emotionally able to deal with the reality. Like she was very emotional, even though she probably, as a mom, you're probably thinking everything already. Our lives changed after she went missing because I was a teen mom and I was already living with my mom and I had my 2-year-old son and then Rayvon was 2 as well. So my mom and I had to try to take care of Rayvon for a little while. I was still 19. I think I did just finish high school. So it was a lot of responsibility. And then for her to have to start over raising a child again. And then she's got this daughter missing. And then, so Tika eventually took Rayvon. I'm not sure, I don't know how long it took, but she ended up, because she had older kids.
A year after Deana's disappearance, the family held a candlelight vigil in her honor, and in hopes of keeping her in the minds of Nashville's citizens. Per the Tennessean, quote, about 100 people attended, and her father, Sidney, he spoke to the crowd. He told them, quote, I miss her. My family really misses her. It's a really bad time. The article provided no updates on the investigation into her missing persons case. Her mother, Wanda Faye Walker, spent the next 17 years mourning the loss of her daughter and helping Lakeisha raise Deana's son, Rayvon. A few anniversary articles appeared in the local media, but Deana's case received little attention, less than Wanda's own case would when she vanished in 2016. Lakeisha told us it was a struggle for their mother to face down so many years without answers.
She was very distraught. She was very emotional, like the whole not knowing, when we kind of knew that Deana was like a little wild. She was a wild child, but she had changed her life. When she had Ray, she changed her life, and she was in church and she was doing all this positive, good stuff. You know, she was headed on the right track, and then this happened. My dad really was still today go through that, I just get jealous when I go to funerals because they know. They do know. They have a site to go to. And he's like, I don't have that. And people like try to compare our situations to a person that's like done passed on and they've had their closure with burying them. But we feel like we still feel lost because we don't have that. When my sister disappeared, I think we all cleaned in closer together. Just the whole not knowing, somebody actually did something to her. Could have been someone we know. We got to be safe. We got to check our surroundings more. We have to be more vigilant about what we're doing. So when it hit back with my mom, I think it was a detective that was like, do you think that this could be affiliated with that? And I'm like, never. I doubt that very seriously. But how will we know when we don't even know about that? I really do feel like, when she disappeared, I lost half of myself because I feel like when she disappeared, I left. But I know that I still had to be here for everybody, for my children for sure. And then her son, Yeah, I just thank God for having them in my life as long as I did have them in my life to get to know them, and I get a lot of my traits from my mom, and I really love her too. I miss her. I miss both of them so much, but they had a big, big impact on growing up and, just me and my sister, just the times we had together, a lot of good times, a lot of crazy times. Just thankful for the times I did have with them. And I'll keep it with me forever.
The one thing that Lakeisha could do for her sister was to love her son, Rayvon, and to raise him. And that's what she did. She told us that they have a connection that few people understand because they've both been through the same thing.
He knows what I'm dealing with. So he has a missing mom. I have a missing mom, So we try to relate the best way we can. That's my guy. Yeah, he really, really appreciates me too. He shows all sorts of love. Like, he know that, like, I took him in and I helped raise him up to be, the guy he is. He's a good guy.
When Detective Filter inherited Deana's case, the leads and witness statements were years old, but he tells us that his department still considers it an open and active investigation, and that they are both reinvestigating and pursuing new information in her disappearance.
There's some leads that we're still working on and hoping will prove to be fruitful in trying to get some answers as to what happened to her. But just like with all the other cases, there's always a lack of information. And so we're always looking for that little piece that is just going to help us move this case or take it over the top that's going to allow us to successfully get it prosecuted.
That's where our Tennessee and our Southeastern listeners more generally can be of the most help. New tips and leads in Deana's case could make the difference between a cold case and the prosecution that Detective Filter mentioned. We need to share her story across the region, across the United States if we can. People move, and they also decide that it's time to share what they know as more time passes. Maybe fear subsides or conscience finally kicks in. Whatever the reason, it is time to come forward, particularly if you saw Laresha Deana Walker anytime on the weekend of November 19th, 1999. At the time of her disappearance, Laresha Deana Walker was 23 years old. She'd now be 49. She's a Black female described as 5'7", 190 to 200 pounds, and has a scar from heart surgery on her chest. Deana has brown hair and brown eyes, and she had a distinctive cap on her upper front tooth. It's a gold cap inscribed with the letter D, which was removable. Her family says that she did not have the D in place when she was last seen, but the inlaid cap was permanent, and it would be visible. If you have information regarding Deana's disappearance, please contact Detective Matthew Filter at 615-862-7803. You can also call Nashville Crime Stoppers at 615-74-CRIME. Calls remain anonymous and may qualify for a cash reward. Next time on The Fall Line, the disappearance of Wanda Faye Walker. Be sure to join us then to help spread the word and encourage tips in both women's cases, because the Walkers are searching for not one, but two missing loved ones. If you know of a case that should be featured on The Fall Line, there's a link to our case submission form in the show notes. Thank you for listening. The Fall Line is an independent podcast, and we appreciate listener support. If you try out the products we advertise, please use our sponsor codes. It really helps. And please take a moment to rate and review our show on your podcast app of choice. If you listen on Apple Podcast, please be sure to check your subscription to make sure you're set for automatic downloads so you don't miss an episode. My book, Lay Them to Rest, is available anywhere you get books and through your local library. Find out more in the link in our show notes. And if you'd like to support the show and the stories we cover, join us on Patreon or Apple Premium. Through both platforms, you can gain early, ad-free access to our episodes. The Fall Line's Patreon and Apple Premium support our Family Therapy Fund and actively pay for therapy for families who've appeared on the show. The Fall Line is written, hosted, and researched by Laura Norton. with additional research assistance by Melissa Gold. Interviews by Brooke Harko. Produced, engineered, and scored by Maura Curry. Content advisement by Vic Kennedy and Brandy C. Williams. Special thanks to Liz Lipka.